I still remember the sound of the spoon clinking against the teacup. It was an ordinary Sunday morning, quiet enough to hear the birds outside and the ticking clock in the living room. My son, Adil, had just come home after a week of work. I had made his favorite breakfast, parathas and chai, with that mother's excitement that never fades, no matter how old the child becomes. Sana, his fiancée, was sitting across from me. She looked calm, almost too calm. I was talking about wedding dates, excitedly listing venues and decorators, when I asked casually, "So, when should we fix the wedding?" She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was small, nervous, and cold. Then she said those words. "We got married yesterday." Just like that. For a moment, I didn't understand what she meant. The cup slipped from my hand, the hot tea spilling over the tablecloth. My heart stopped. My mouth went dry. I looked at her face, then at my son's. He was staring at the floor, silent. I asked again, "You got married?" He nodded, barely lifting his head. That moment felt like the ground beneath me had opened. The son I raised with my own hands, the one I prayed for every night, had married behind my back. No call, no blessing, no mother's presence. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I kept looking at them. My voice trembled. Without me? Without even telling me? Sana leaned back and said softly, "We didn't want drama, Ami." Drama. That word cut through me like a knife. My presence at my own son's wedding was drama. I felt a strange ringing in my ears. I could see her lips moving, but the words didn't reach me. I saw Adil shift uncomfortably, still avoiding my eyes. He looked like a child caught stealing, except this time the theft was my dignity. All I could whisper was, "So, I was never meant to be part of your happiness?" He said quietly, "Ami, it was sudden. We didn't plan it like this." Sana interrupted. "We didn't want a big fuss. Just a simple ceremony. Papers signed. Done. Done, as if marriage was some office task." My body went numb. I looked at the table, the untouched food, the spilled tea, the steam fading away, and I realized how fast everything can die, even warmth. I walked to my room without another word. Behind me, I heard Sana say, "She'll get used to it. Used to it." Inside my room, I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. My wedding photo hung there, me in red, smiling beside my husband, full of dreams. He had died too young, leaving me with a boy and a promise, to raise him with love, to make sure he never felt alone. I had done that. I had kept every promise, and now, my son had broken them all in one sentence. I couldn't cry. The tears didn't come. It was like my heart had turned to stone. Later that day, I heard laughter coming from the living room. Sana was showing Adil pictures on her phone. Their voices were playful, careless. My pain didn't exist to them. I stepped out and said, "I thought you'd at least ask for my blessings." Sana replied, "Ami, don't take it personally. We're adults. We just wanted to keep it simple." "Simple?" I said. "You hid your marriage from your mother. Is that simple to you?" Adil tried to calm me. "Ami, please. It's done now. We'll make it up to you." "Make it up to me?" I laughed bitterly. "You can't make up being erased from your own son's life." Sana crossed her arms. "We didn't erase you. You're overreacting." That word again. Overreacting. How easily people dismiss your pain when it's inconvenient for them. I turned to Adil. "You didn't even tell me, Beta. Not a word." He whispered, "I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me," I said. "You wanted to hide me. There's a difference." He didn't respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, their calmness, their lack of guilt. My chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a stone inside. I kept thinking about his childhood, his small hands holding mine when we crossed the road, his voice calling me Ami after a nightmare, his promise that he'd never let me be alone. Now, even that word, Ami sounded hollow. The next morning, Sana had already taken over the kitchen. My spices were moved, my utensils rearranged. She acted like she owned everything. I stood there silently, watching her cut vegetables on my old wooden board. She said casually, "You should rest more, Ami. I'll handle this." But I heard the hidden message, "Stay out of the way." Adil came in, smiling awkwardly. "Ami, Sana cooks really well. You'll love her food." I wanted to tell him I didn't care about the food. I cared about the respect that had disappeared, but I said nothing. As the days passed, I noticed how carefully they avoided including me in their conversations. They had their own jokes, their own secrets. Every whisper made me feel smaller. One evening, I gathered the courage to talk again. "Adil, can we sit for a while? Just talk." He hesitated. "Ami, we're going out. Maybe later." I said softly, "Beta, I just want to understand. Why didn't you tell me?" He looked frustrated. "Because you would have made it big, Ami. You would have called relatives, planned everything. We just wanted peace." Peace. Another word used to justify betrayal. Sana joined him at the door, holding her purse. "Ami, we'll be late. Please don't start this again." Start this again. As if my pain was some old argument they were tired of hearing. When they left, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the clock. The ticking sound mocked me. Time moved on, but I was stuck in the same moment. The moment I heard that sen, Dendema. "We got married yesterday." I said it aloud, just to feel the weight of it again. It still crushed me. A week later, Adil's aunt came to visit. The first thing she asked was, "When's the wedding?" I smiled weakly and said, "It's already done." She looked shocked. "Already? Without you?" I nodded. She sighed and whispered, "You gave him too much freedom." Her words hurt, but deep down I knew she was right. I had loved him without boundaries, maybe too much. That night, I took out an old box from my cupboard. It had my husband's watch, some letters, and Adil's childhood drawings. One of them showed him holding my hand, with the words written in shaky handwriting, "Me and Ami forever." I pressed that paper against my chest and cried for the first time. Days blurred into each other. Sana's tone grew sharper. Adil became quieter. I could feel myself disappearing in my own home. Even the maid started taking orders from Sana instead of me. Once when I tried to advise her about house expenses, she said, "Ami, let's not make everything your decision. We have our own way now." Our own way. The house that I built with sweat and tears was now their house. One afternoon, I overheard them arguing. Sana was saying, "Your mother doesn't like me. I can feel it." Adil said, "She just needs time." She replied, "No, she'll never accept me. Maybe we should move out." I froze behind the door. Move out. My son wanted to leave just so his wife wouldn't have to share space with me. That night, I confronted him. "Adil, are you planning to leave?" He sighed. "Ami, it's not like that. Sana feels uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" I said. "In her husband's mother's house?" He stayed silent. Silence. His favorite escape. I said bitterly, "If your father were alive, would you dare do this?" He looked away. "Abu isn't here, Ami. Things are different now, Efra." And everything was different. I went back to my room and stared at the mirror. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Tired eyes, trembling lips. I touched my face and whispered, "Maybe I became the problem." But no, I wasn't the problem. I was just the one left behind. Every morning after that, I forced myself to act normal. I made tea. I greeted them. I smiled when they passed by. But inside, I was empty. I had become a ghost, wandering in my own home. Once, when Sana's mother came to visit, she said, "You're lucky, Nasima ji. At least they're together and happy." I smiled politely, but inside I wanted to scream, "Happy? At what cost?" That night, I couldn't sleep again. I replayed everything from the beginning, the excitement, the shock, the betrayal. And slowly, I realized something. It wasn't just that they got married without me. It was that they didn't need me anymore. That was the real wound. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. When they came out, I served the food silently. Sana said, "Ami, you didn't have to do that." I replied calmly, "I know, I wanted to." Adil looked uneasy. He sensed something in my tone. I said quietly, "I hope you both get everything you ever wanted. I just wish you had remembered who stood beside you when you had nothing." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I turned away before he could see my tears. In that silence, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was emptiness, mixed with clarity. I had lost my son, not to death, but to distance, the kind that grows between hearts when respect disappears. That was the day I understood the cruelest truth. Sometimes, love isn't enough to keep someone close. And as I sat in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by memories, I whispered to myself, maybe I raised the wrong son. The sentence lingered in the air, heavy and final, just like the one that had stopped my hair. Shad. After that night, silence became my routine. I stopped asking questions. I stopped expecting anything. I just moved quietly through the house, like a ghost. Every morning, I'd hear them laughing in the kitchen, the sound of plates, the smell of toast. It all used to mean family. Now, it just meant distance. Sana had completely taken over. My own kitchen didn't feel like mine anymore. Once when I reached for a jar of sugar, she said, "Ami, I've rearranged everything. Let me handle it." Her tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't kind either. It was the voice of someone reminding me that I didn't belong. Adil stood nearby, pretending not to notice. That hurt more than her words. My son, the boy I raised with love and struggle, didn't see how small I had become. At night, I sat in my room and looked at my husband's picture. I whispered, "He's changed. Our son has changed." And I swear, even the walls seemed to whisper back, "No, he just forgot." Days blurred together. I became the shadow in the hallway, the extra chair at the table, the quiet presence no one spoke to. I tried to help around the house, but Sana would always stop me. "Ami, please rest. You're old now." Old. That word hit harder than any insult. I wasn't old. I was unwanted. One afternoon, she invited her friends over. The girls laughed loudly, talking about makeup, new clothes, and travel plans. I came out of my room, smiling politely. Sana turned to them and said, "That's Adil's mom. She likes to keep things traditional." Just Adil's mom. Not Ami. Not even my name. One of the girls said, "Oh, you still live with them? That's so sweet." I felt my throat tighten. Before I could answer, Sana replied, "Yes, for now. But we're planning to move soon." Move soon. My heart dropped. I didn't even know about it. I looked at Adil, who was sitting nearby scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. After they left, I asked him, "You're moving out?" He said casually, "It's just talk, Ami. Sana wants privacy." "Privacy from me?" I asked. He sighed. "It's not like that. You take everything personally." "I'm your mother, Adil," I said softly. "I'm not a stranger you met last week." He didn't answer. He just walked out of the room. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about all the years I spent working late nights to pay his school fees, the winters when I stitched clothes till my fingers bled, the times I stayed hungry so he could have milk. Every memory felt like a slap. I wasn't jealous of Sana. I just wanted a little space in his heart. But it was like she had built a wall between us, a wall of new priorities, new loyalties. One evening I overheard them arguing. Sana's voice was sharp. "She doesn't like me, Adil. I can feel it." He said, "You're imagining things. She's just quiet." "She's always watching me," Sana continued. "I can't breathe in this house. Either she goes, or I do." I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son said softly, "Don't talk like that, Sana." But he didn't defend me either. That night, I cried silently into my pillow. My tears felt useless, like they didn't belong to me anymore. The next morning, I tried to make peace. I made breakfast early and placed it on the table before they woke up. I thought maybe they'd see the effort, maybe something would soften. When Sana came out, she frowned. "Ami, you didn't have to cook. I had plans for breakfast." I smiled weakly. I just wanted to do it for my son. She said coldly, "Adil's on a diet now. He doesn't eat oily food." My heart sank. Even my food, once his favorite, wasn't welcome anymore. When Adil came out, I waited for him to say something, anything, but he just grabbed a protein bar and said, "We'll eat outside, Ami." Eat outside. Leave me behind. Again. After they left, I sat at the table staring at the untouched parathas. The food went cold. The tea turned bitter. I didn't throw it away. I just sat there, thinking about how easy it is for love to fade when someone stops remembering its cost. Later that week, I found Sana packing boxes in the living room. I asked carefully, "You're moving already?" She smiled. "Just organizing. But yes, we're planning to find a new apartment." I whispered, "And me?" She looked at me, her smile fading. "Ami, you deserve peace. You'll be more comfortable in your own space." My throat tightened. "My own space? This is my home." She shrugged. "Adil will explain." When Adil came home that evening, I confronted him. "You're leaving, aren't you?" He sighed. "Ami, please don't make it emotional. It's just a small change. You'll be fine here." "Fine here?" I asked. "Alone?" He said, "I'll visit every week." I laughed bitterly. "You live in the same city and talk like you're going abroad." Sana walked in. "Ami, don't make him feel guilty. We need to live our life." "Our life?" I said, staring at her. "What about mine?" She turned away. "You had yours." That line hit me so hard I couldn't speak. I just walked away before my tears fell. That night, I opened my old wedding album. My husband's eyes looked back at me with warmth. I touched his picture and whispered, "I did everything I could. I gave him everything. And still, I lost him." I remembered the last promise I made to my husband before he died. I'll raise him right. I'll make sure he grows up kind. But now, I wasn't sure I had kept that promise. The next day, I tried to talk again. "Adil, if I did something wrong, tell me. Don't push me away like this." He said tiredly, "Ami, you didn't do anything. But things are different now. Sana needs freedom. I can't choose between you two." "You already did," I whispered. He looked down. "Please don't make this harder." "I'm not making it harder," I said, tears in my voice. "You're making it empty." For a long time, he said nothing. Then he left for work, and Sana shut herself in their room. That's when I realized I wasn't a mother in this house anymore. I was an outsider with memories no one cared about. In the following days, I started spending more time outside, walking through the park, visiting the nearby mosque, sitting under trees. At least there, no one looked at me like I was a burden. One afternoon, I met an old neighbor, Farida. She asked, "Where's Adil these days? You must be so proud." I forced a smile. "He's busy." She said kindly, "Busy boys forget sometimes, but they always come back." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But every time I came home, I saw the distance growing wider. Sana began locking their room. They had private dinners, private talks, private plans. I had become a background sound in their story, just the rustle of footsteps they ignored. One evening, I heard the sound of moving boxes again. This time, it was real. They were leaving. I walked out slowly. "You didn't even tell me the date." Adil looked guilty. "Ami, I was going to. We just finalized the place." Sana said softly, "You'll love it here alone, Ami. You'll have peace. Peace. Everyone kept using that word as if loneliness was peace. I said quietly, "Take care of each other. That's all I can say." Adil hugged me, but it felt like a formality, cold and quick. Then they left. The door closed behind them with a thud that echoed through the empty house. I sat in the silence. The same walls that once held laughter now felt hollow. I walked to the window and watched them drive away, their car disappearing down the road. I thought, maybe this is how mothers fade, from center to corner, from name to memory. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat in the dark, listening to the ticking clock, waiting for something that wouldn't come. And as the hours passed, I whispered to myself, I raised a son who forgot, but maybe forgetting was easier than remembering. Who helped him stand. The house felt colder, but inside that cold, a strange strength began to grow. A quiet voice whispered inside me, "You may have been forgotten, but you are not finished." That was the night I stopped expecting anything from them. And without realizing it, that was also the night my story began to change. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It was the same walls, the same furniture, the same old photographs staring down from the hallway, but the air was different. Cold, heavy, silent. Every morning I heard their laughter from the kitchen, soft and secretive, like I wasn't supposed to hear it. My son used to wake me for breakfast. Now the smell of tea came late, and there was only one cup left on the table, his wife's. I remember the first time I tried to sit with them. It was a Sunday. The sun was bright, the house smelled of parathas, and for a moment, I felt brave enough to walk in. I smiled and said, "Can I help with something?" She didn't even look at me. "Everything's done, Ami," she said flatly, her hands moving fast over the stove. But when my son came in, she turned all sweet. "You want more sugar, John?" The word hit me like a slap. John. That's what I used to call him. Now, it belonged to someone else. I sat down quietly, trying not to show my face. He glanced at me once, just once, then turned away. It was enough to break my heart. I thought it was just distance. I told myself, it happens after marriage. They need space. But as the days passed, space turned into walls, and walls turned into silence. One evening, I heard them whispering in the next room. Her voice, low, sharp, cut through the door. "She doesn't need to interfere in everything. You said we'd have our own life, remember?" My heart froze. Then my son's voice came, softer, nervous. "She's my mother. I can't just—" She interrupted. "I know, but she eats me like I'm some outsider. You told me you'd handle it." I waited for him to defend me, just one word, one sentence. But all I heard was silence. That silence told me everything. The next morning, I stayed in my room longer than usual. I wanted to see if anyone would notice. No one did. By noon, I came out to find the table cleared, dishes washed, and both of them dressed to go out. I asked gently, "Where are you going?" Her eyes didn't even meet mine. "We're meeting some friends." And my son, my own blood, just nodded. "We'll be back late." "No. Do you want anything?" "No. Take care, Ami." Nothing. When the door shut, I sat down on the sofa and stared at the empty hallway. I felt like an old painting on the wall, still there, but no one really saw me anymore. At night, when they came back, I heard them laughing again. Something inside me cracked open. I wanted to cry, but I was too tired. So I whispered to myself, maybe love fades. Maybe even a mother can become invisible. But the next day proved me wrong. Love doesn't fade. It's pushed away. I went to the kitchen to make tea, but the kettle was gone. So were my favorite cups. When I opened the cupboard, everything had been rearranged. I stood there, confused. She walked in just then, holding her phone. "Oh, I moved things around," she said casually. "It's more convenient this way." I smiled weakly. "Beta, I've had it like this for years. It helps me remember where things are." She shrugged. "Well, we live here now too. We should do things our way." Something in her tone wasn't just disrespectful. It was ownership. That kitchen, the same one where I had raised my son, didn't belong to me anymore. I looked at her and said softly, "You know, I used to cook his favorite meal every Friday. He loved it." She laughed without warmth. "He likes new things now." Those words hit harder than any slap. He likes new things now, as if my love was outdated. That night, when my son came home, I tried to talk to him. "Can we sit for a minute?" I asked. He hesitated but sat down. I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were distant, like a stranger's. "I don't want to come between you two," I began carefully, "but lately I feel like I don't belong in this house." He sighed. "Ami, please don't start again." "Start what?" I asked. "I'm just talking to my son." He rubbed his forehead. "You're overthinking everything. She's trying her best. You should too." I wanted to scream. "I am trying." But all that came out was a whisper. "You've changed." He stood up and said quietly, "Maybe it's time you changed too." Then he walked away. That night, I cried silently into my pillow. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. "I love you, Ami." Days turned into weeks. The distance grew until it was a wound that wouldn't heal. I started eating alone, praying alone, even talking to myself just to hear a voice. Once, I left food for them on the table. When I came back, it was untouched. Instead, there were delivery boxes in the bin. She had ordered dinner from outside. I asked her softly, "You didn't like the food?" She replied with a smile that wasn't really a smile. "It's fine, just different tastes." Different tastes, different hearts, different home. Then came the day that sealed the division. It was my husband's death anniversary. Every year, my son and I went to the mosque together. That morning, I dressed early, waiting by the door. He came out of the room wearing a new shirt. I smiled and said, "Ready?" But before he could speak, she appeared behind him. "We're going to her cousin's engagement," she said. I looked at him, confused. "But today is—" He avoided my eyes. "I'll visit later, Ami. Just not now." "Not now," my voice cracked. "Your father gave everything for you, one day, and you can't—" She interrupted coldly. "Please, Ami, stop emotional blackmail." The words hit like knives. I didn't even know how to answer. I just stepped aside as they left, the sound of their laughter echoing behind them. When the door closed, something inside me did too. That evening, I went to the mosque alone. The wind was cold, but the silence was colder. I prayed with tears falling down my face, whispering to Allah, "Where did I go wrong?" When I came home, the lights were off. They hadn't returned yet. I sat in the dark, staring at the empty chairs, and whispered to myself, "This isn't my home anymore." The next few days, I stopped speaking much. If they needed something, I nodded or smiled, but the words felt heavy. Once, she came to me and said sweetly, "Ami, you seem upset. Did I do something?" I wanted to believe her tone was genuine, but her eyes told another story. They were testing me, measuring my weakness. So I smiled and said, "No, Beta, I'm fine." She leaned closer and whispered, "Good, because it's hard for him when you act this way." Her words were poison wrapped in honey. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I just walked away before she saw the tears. A week later, my son announced they were going on a short trip. "Just 3 days," he said. I smiled and said, "That's nice. You both deserve a break." But when I went to my room that night, I overheard her voice again through the wall. "She's too quiet lately. Maybe she's planning something." And he replied, "Stop it, she's not like that." She laughed softly. "You still don't see, do you? She doesn't want you to be happy." I covered my ears, not because of what she said, but because part of me feared he believed her. The morning they left, I stood at the door, waving. He smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't meet mine. When the car drove off, I whispered, "Goodbye, my son." And for the first time, it felt like I meant it. For 3 days, the house was silent, peaceful, almost. I could breathe again. But when they returned, everything changed. The trip had made them closer. He laughed more, she glowed more, and I disappeared completely. They talked about their plans, their new furniture, even hinted about moving somewhere else. One night, as I passed their room, I heard her say, "If we move, she'll be alone here." And my son replied, "She'll be fine." I froze. Those 3 words, "she'll be fine," broke something inside me that could never be fixed. The next morning, I sat in the garden with my tea. He came out, phone in hand. I looked at him and said softly, "Are you happy?" He smiled, surprised. "Yeah. Why do you ask?" I nodded. "Because I'm trying to remember what it looks like." He frowned. "Amy," I interrupted gently. "It's okay, Beta. I just hope when you look back someday, you remember who stood behind you when no one else did." He didn't reply. He just looked away, pretending to check his phone. And I knew. My son was still here, but my place in his life was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was dark, but my mind was loud. I kept hearing her voice, his silence, and my own words. "Are you happy?" That was the night I decided something had to change. Not for them, for me. I don't remember the exact moment my tears ran out, but I remember the silence that came after. It was louder than any scream. For weeks, every sound in this house, every closing door, every whispered laugh, had broken me piece by piece. But that morning when I heard them laughing in the kitchen, I didn't cry. I just stood by my window, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold, and realized I had no more tears left to give. I had been living like a ghost in my own home. My son, my only son, barely looked at me anymore. His wife, my new daughter-in-law, moved around like the queen of a kingdom I built. I had cooked, cleaned, sacrificed everything to make this house a home for him. Now it felt like a stranger's house, and I was the stranger. "Good morning, Ma," she said that day, her tone sharp under a fake sweetness. "Good morning," I replied, trying to sound calm. She smiled faintly. "We're going out later. Don't wait for lunch." I nodded. She didn't wait for me to answer. My son came down the stairs, adjusting his shirt. He didn't meet my eyes. "We'll be back late," he said flatly. That used to be the time I'd ask where he was going, what he'd like for dinner. But I stopped. What was the point? He didn't want a mother anymore, just peace from the guilt of ignoring me. I watched them leave. The door closed. The car engine started. And I whispered to myself, "Enough." That word carried a strange weight. It didn't sound like anger. It sounded like truth. Enough crying, enough waiting, enough begging for respect in a house I helped build. I started cleaning the kitchen that morning, not because it was dirty, but because I needed something to do with my shaking hands. The sink overflowed with water, the bubbles rising and popping like little promises. I scrubbed and scrubbed until my knuckles turned red. And as I worked, I realized how long I had been cleaning up everyone else's mess, emotional and otherwise. For years, I had been the problem solver, the peacemaker, the one who stayed quiet so others could stay comfortable. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's prison. That night, when they returned, I was sitting in the living room with the lights off. My son turned them on and froze when he saw me there. "Ma, you scared me," he said. I didn't move. "Where were you?" He glanced at his wife, then said, "We were at her friend's dinner." I nodded. "Did you enjoy it?" He frowned. "Why does it matter?" "It doesn't," I said quietly. "Not anymore." His wife walked past me toward the stairs, pretending to yawn. "I'm tired," she said. "Let's talk tomorrow." I looked at her and replied, "No need. There's nothing left to talk about." My son looked confused, maybe even nervous. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one not begging, not crying, not explaining. "Ma, are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, for the first time in a long time. He hesitated, then followed her upstairs. Their footsteps faded, and again the house fell into that strange quiet. But this time, it didn't hurt. It felt peaceful. Over the next few days, I began to change quietly. I stopped cooking elaborate meals. I stopped waiting for them at the dinner table. I started eating alone, sitting near the window where the evening light fell softly on my hands. Sometimes I'd whisper to myself, "This is what freedom tastes like." It was lonely, yes, but it was also mine. Then came the day she crossed the final line. It was Sunday morning. I was watering the plants in the courtyard when I heard her voice from inside, mocking me on the phone. "She acts so holy," she said, laughing, "but she's just bitter because she can't control him anymore." My heart froze. I felt the watering can slip from my hand. For a moment, I stood still, the water soaking into the dirt at my feet. When I entered the living room, she was still talking. "Oh, she's here," she said suddenly, realizing I'd walked in. "Continue," I said calmly. "Say it in front of me." Her smile vanished. "It was nothing, Ma. Just say it," I repeated. "Tell me what you really think." She looked toward the stairs, hoping my son would appear. But he didn't. I stepped closer. "All this time I tried to earn your respect," I said. "I wanted peace, I wanted family. But you wanted power." She crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." "Maybe," I said, "but drama is all you brought into this house." For a second, she looked shaken. Then she smirked. "Your son agrees with me," she said quietly. "He's tired of your emotional games." That sentence hit harder than any slap. I felt my knees weaken. But I didn't cry. Not this time. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You can have him then. But remember, what's built on disrespect never lasts." I walked away, leaving speechless. Upstairs, I locked my door. My hands were trembling, but my face stayed dry. That was the first day I realized the power of not reacting. Later that night, he came knocking. "Ma, open the door," he said. I stayed silent. "Please, Ma." His voice softened. She told me what happened. I opened the door slowly. His eyes searched my face, maybe expecting to see tears. But I had none. "She said you shouted at her," he began. "I didn't shout," I said. "I spoke the truth. Something you should have done long ago." "Why are you making this harder?" he said helplessly. "Because I made it too easy for too long," I replied. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I just want peace." "So do I said. "But peace without honesty is a lie." He didn't know how to answer. Finally he left, closing the door softly behind him. That night, I sat by the window and looked at the stars. I used to pray every night for things to go back to how they were, for my son to smile at me like he used to. But that night, I prayed for something else. I prayed for courage. Courage to stop waiting. Courage to stop breaking myself for people who didn't care if I shattered. The next morning, I woke up early and took out an old suitcase. I began folding my clothes one by one. I didn't know exactly where I would go, maybe my sister's house, maybe a small apartment nearby, but I knew I couldn't stay where my heart wasn't respected. When my son saw the suitcase, his face went pale. "Ma, what are you doing?" "I'm giving you what you want," I said. "A house without my rules, a life without my presence." He looked stunned. "You're leaving because of her?" "No," I said softly. "I'm leaving because of me." He tried to stop me. "Please, Ma, don't do this. You're misunderstanding." "Am I?" I asked. "You married without telling me. You stopped speaking to me. You let her insult me in my own house. What part am I misunderstanding?" He had no answer. His silence said everything. As I zipped the suitcase, I noticed his eyes filling with tears. For a moment, I felt the old ache rise in my chest, the part of me that always wanted to forgive, to comfort, but I pushed it down. I put my hand on his shoulder. I raised you to be strong, I said. But I forgot to teach you something important. Respect. He looked down. I do respect you, Ma. Respect is not in words, I said. It's in how you treat someone when nobody's watching. Then I picked up the suitcase and walked toward the door. His wife stood in the hallway, frozen. She didn't say anything, maybe because she didn't expect me to actually leave. But I smiled faintly at her. Don't worry, I said. The house is yours now. Take good care of it. It was once built with love. When I stepped outside, the air felt different, sharp, cold, real. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I walked down the street with my head high, my heart heavy but strong. Every step felt like shedding a layer of pain. Every corner I turned whispered the same truth. You survived. That night, I stayed with my sister. She held my hands and said, "You should have done this long ago." I nodded. Maybe, but I needed to lose everything to find myself. For days, I didn't hear from them. Then one evening, my phone rang. It was him. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Ma," he said quietly. "The house feels empty without you." I paused. It was empty even when I was there. He exhaled. "I know. I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. Silence was my new language. He continued. "She's been different since you left. Maybe I made a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but some mistakes are teachers." He started crying. "Can you come back?" I closed my eyes. "Not yet," I said. "I'm still learning how to live without crying." When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not bitterness, not revenge, just peace. I had spent so long chasing love that I forgot to protect my dignity. Now, for the first time, I was choosing myself. And that's when I realized the day I stopped crying wasn't the day I stopped feeling. It was the day I started healing. It had been 2 weeks since I left that house, 2 weeks since I walked away from everything I built. And in those 2 weeks, I finally learned what silence felt like when it wasn't filled with pain. No footsteps, no arguments, no cold glances, just the sound of my own breathing, steady, calm, alive. I stayed with my sister. Every morning she'd bring me tea and say, "You're glowing again." I would smile faintly and reply, "Maybe because I finally stopped bleeding from invisible wounds." But deep inside, I still thought of him. My son. The boy who used to hold my hand while crossing the road, now lost in the shadow of someone else's control. Sometimes at night, I'd look at his old pictures on my phone and whisper, "Where did you go, my child?" Then one evening, there was a knock at the door. It was late, the sky was dark, the street quiet. My sister looked up from the sofa. "Are you expecting someone?" I shook my head. "No." The knock came again, louder this time. Something in my heart knew. When I opened the door, I froze. There he was, my son, standing in the cold, with tired eyes and a trembling voice. "Ma," he said softly, "can I come in?" For a moment I couldn't move. The sight of him brought every buried feeling rushing back. Anger, love, disappointment, hope. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said quietly. He walked in, holding nothing but guilt. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red, as if he hadn't slept. My sister quietly left the room, giving us space. The silence between us was heavy. "I didn't know where else to go," he said finally. "You have a home," I replied. "The one you chose." He looked down. "That house doesn't feel like home anymore." I wanted to speak, but my throat closed. He continued. She left, Ma. She said she couldn't live with my regrets. She said I'd never truly be hers because part of me still belongs to you. I stared at him. He's stunned. She left? He nodded slowly. 3 days ago. Packed her bags. Said she was done. I sat down. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed calm. And now you remember your mother? Ma, please, he said. I know I was wrong. Wrong? I repeated. You broke my heart, son. You watched her insult me and stayed silent. He dropped to his knees. I thought I was protecting peace. There's no peace in disrespect, I said. Only distance. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't realize how much you meant until you were gone. I took a slow breath. Love should not need absence to be noticed. The room fell quiet again. I could hear the ticking clock. Every tick felt like the sound of time reminding us what we'd lost. Finally, I stood. Get up, I said. He looked up at me, confused. Ma? Get up, I repeated. You don't kneel to me. You stand, and you face what you've done. He stood slowly, wiping his eyes. I said, You married without telling me. You lied to yourself thinking love can survive without truth. But life has a strange way of teaching lessons. Now tell me, what do you want from me? He hesitated. Forgiveness. I smiled faintly. Forgiveness is easy. Trust isn't. He looked down, ashamed. Can I stay here tonight? I nodded. You can stay. But remember, this is not about comfort. This is about change. That night, I made him tea, the same way I used to when he was little. He sat quietly at the table, watching me move around the small kitchen. Ma, he said softly, I miss the way things used to be. So do I replied. But what we miss isn't the past. It's the people we were back then, before pride took over. He stared into his cup. I thought she needed me to prove I'd left you behind. I sighed. Any love that asks you to abandon your roots is not love. It's control. For the first time in months, he smiled weakly. You always know the right words. No, I said. I just lived long enough to understand pain. He went to bed early that night. I watched him sleeping on the couch, the same couch he'd once jumped on as a child. I wanted to cover him with a blanket like I used to, but I stopped myself. Some gestures belong to a time that's gone. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of breakfast. He was in the kitchen trying to make parathas, burning half of them. He turned and laughed nervously. I thought I'd surprise you. I smiled. Well, you did. He shrugged. I wanted to do something for you. After all the years you did everything for me. We sat and ate quietly. Between the laughter and awkwardness, something felt lighter. But I knew healing wasn't the same as forgetting. After breakfast, he said, Ma, can I take you somewhere? Where? You'll see, he said. We drove in silence. The car passed the same streets I'd once walked alone, carrying groceries and heartache. Finally, we stopped outside my old house. My chest tightened. He looked at me. I want you to come back. I shook my head. No, son. That house doesn't need me anymore. It does, he said. It feels dead without you. I turned to face him. The house didn't die, son. It just learned the truth, that love built on lies collapses. He clenched the steering wheel, tears glistening. I wish I could undo everything. You can't, I said gently, but you can start again, with honesty this time. We sat there in silence. The house stood still before us, quiet and empty, just like the space between us. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. Something I should have given you a long time ago, he said. Inside was a letter, his handwriting shaky but sincere. It said, Ma, thank you for raising me. I thought being a man meant standing apart, but now I know it means standing with the ones who made you who you are. I hope one day you'll be proud of me again. Nah. I folded the letter and held it close to my heart. I never stopped being proud, I said. I was just hurt. He reached out and held my hand. Will you ever come home? I looked out the window. Maybe, but only when it feels like home again. He nodded slowly. Then I'll make it one. For the first time, I believed him. His eyes had lost the arrogance I once saw. There was humility now, and understanding. Back at my sister's house, he hugged me before leaving. Thank you for opening the door, Ma, he whispered. I smiled. Thank you for knocking. When he left, I stood at the doorway for a long time. The evening wind brushed my face, carrying the scent of jasmine. It reminded me that endings can smell like beginnings if you breathe differently. That night, I sat by the window, looking at the moon. I thought about everything: the betrayal, the silence, the courage it took to walk away. And now, this unexpected visit. I realized something important. Sometimes life brings the people who hurt you back, not to reopen wounds, but to show how much you've healed. The next day, he returned again, this time with flowers. My sister laughed. Looks like he's trying to win you back. He grinned shyly. One step at a time. I took the flowers and placed them in a vase. Beautiful, I said. He smiled. They're for the strongest woman I know. We sat and talked for hours. No blame, no bitterness, just truth. He told me how he'd been manipulated, how love had blinded him, how guilt had eaten him alive. I listened, not to judge, but to understand. At one point he asked, Ma, do you still hate her? I thought for a moment. No, I said. Hate is heavy. I'm tired of carrying things that don't belong to me. He nodded slowly. You've changed. I smiled. I had to. Pain forced me to grow up a second time. By the time he left again that evening, I felt something new in my heart, peace mixed with quiet pride. My son wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and maybe that was enough. Later that night, I wrote in my diary, he came to my door, and for the first time, I didn't open it with pain. I opened it with strength. Because sometimes, forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about showing them they can't break you anymore. As I closed the diary, I whispered to myself, this is not the end. This is the chapter where healing begins. Outside, I heard footsteps fade into the night. The sound of my son walking toward redemption. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind that feels heavy before a storm. But there was no storm outside this time. It was inside me, calm, steady, and no longer breaking. I had stopped crying long ago, and today I wasn't just someone's mother. I was myself again. When I looked into the mirror, I didn't see the woman who waited by the door anymore. I saw the woman who had lived through betrayal, silence, and heartbreak, and survived. For the first time in years, I whispered to my reflection, my name is not just Ammi. My hands trembled slightly as I tied my dupatta. Today, my son was coming home. After all that had happened, the marriage, the distance, the arguments, he had called last night and said, Ammi, can I come see you tomorrow? He sounded hesitant, like a child asking for forgiveness. I had waited years to hear that tone again, but this time, I wasn't desperate for it. I wasn't that mother anymore who begged for attention or love. I was calm. When the knock came, it wasn't loud, just soft, unsure. I opened the door, and there he was, my son, standing like a stranger with guilt in his eyes. Behind him stood his wife, the same girl who once told me, you have no place in this house. But today, her head was bowed. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Assalamu alaikum, Ammi, my son said softly. I nodded, my voice steady. Walaikum assalam, come in. The same house that had once felt it like a cage now felt like mine again. They walked in, and I noticed how nervous they were. The silence stretched between us like a wall. He started first. Ami, I know I've hurt you. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. He looked down, his voice trembling. When she and I got married, I thought I was protecting her. I thought you'd never accept her. But I was wrong. I was scared of losing her. And in that fear, I lost you. His wife's eyes filled with tears. Ami, I was selfish. I didn't understand what it means to be someone's daughter-in-law. I only thought about myself. I looked at both of them quietly. Years ago, I would have burst into tears at their words. I would have begged for their love again. But now, I didn't need their guilt. I took a deep breath. You both made your choices, and I made mine. I stopped waiting for anyone to come fix my heart. I fixed it myself. My son looked up quickly. Ami, please don't say that. I came to make things right. I smiled faintly. And I'm glad you did. But making things right doesn't always mean going back to how they were. Sometimes it means understanding why they broke in the first place. He looked lost, like he didn't understand this new version of me, the one who wasn't weak or broken. His wife wiped her eyes and whispered, Can we start over? I looked at her. Start over? Maybe. But not as the same people. You're not the scared girl anymore, and I'm not just Ami, who keeps quiet when she's insulted. There was silence again, but this time it wasn't painful. It was peaceful. I stood and brought tea from the kitchen. The cups clinked softly as I placed them on the table. Do you remember, I said, how I used to make this tea every evening? You'd come home from work, sit by the window, and tell me about your day. He nodded, eyes moist. I remember, Ami. I thought those days would never end. I continued, but they did, and it's all right, because I've learned love doesn't die when people leave. It dies when you stop respecting yourself. He looked down again, tears in his eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, I said quietly, but I'll give it anyway. Not for you, for me. I want peace, not pain. He reached for my hand slowly, hesitantly. When his fingers touched mine, I didn't pull away. For years, I had imagined this moment. Reunion, apology, tears. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. His wife spoke again, her voice trembling. Ami, I'm pregnant. For a second, my heart stopped. The room went silent. She continued. I didn't want to tell you like this, but I want our child to know his grandmother, the woman I failed to understand. My eyes softened. Does this child know what kind of family it's coming into? She nodded quickly, crying now. That's why I want to make it right. I don't want our baby to grow up in hate. I sighed. Then start by teaching it love. Real love. The kind that doesn't demand or control. The kind that forgives without forgetting. My son stood. Ami, I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to be part of our future. Please, come live with us. I looked around my small, quiet house. For a long moment I didn't answer. Then I said, No, Beta. This is my home now. My peace is here. But I'll visit. I'll be there when you need me. Not as a burden, but as your mother. He looked disappointed, but there was also respect in his eyes. Something I had longed to see for years. I stood and touched his head. You have a family now. Be the kind of husband your father never was. And be the kind of son I can still be proud of. He nodded silently. His wife stood beside him, still crying softly. As they left, I watched them walk to the car, hand in hand. A small smile touched my lips, not because everything was perfect, but because it didn't need to be anymore. When the door closed behind them, the silence he turned, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was mine. I walked to my small desk and opened an old diary, the same one where I had once written my pain, my anger, my loneliness. I turned to the last page and wrote, Today, I learned that motherhood is not about losing yourself for your children. It's about finding yourself again after they leave. I closed the diary and looked at the clock. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors I hadn't noticed in years. Maybe peace was never far away. Maybe I just had to stop searching for it in others. As I sat by the window, I whispered again, "My name is not just Ami. My name is Nasima." The name felt strange on my tongue, like meeting an old friend after years. But it was mine, the one I had buried under duty and silence. And that's when I realized, forgiveness isn't a gift you give others. It's the freedom you give yourself. The wind blew gently through the curtains. Somewhere outside, children were laughing. I smiled, not because my story had a happy ending, but because it finally had an ending I could live with. For years, I had waited for someone to say sorry. But today, I didn't need it anymore. I had said sorry to myself, for all the times I let others define me. As the last light faded, I whispered one last line into the quiet room. A mother's heart never stops loving. It just learns when to let go. And with that, I felt light. Not empty, not broken, just free.